So like maybe we should start to like dissect a little bit, like why do people think that we live in a simulation? So I'll get your input in a second, but to my understanding, I think most of it comes down to the fact that we can model things pretty well computationally. Like, so we can model stuff that happens in the universe pretty well computationally. So we can model it via computation. So, ones and zeros, essentially. You can use that data structure or that, like binary to mimic, to predict, to replicate a bunch of different stuff that happens in the universe. And so then people think, well, at the base layer, well then, if everything's computational at the base layer, therefore we must live in a simulation. And I think that's a jump too far. But I think that's where it comes from. What about you? Have you, from what you've heard or read or?
So we talked about a little bit about this before the pod. I'm going to mention it again. There is this light experiment, right? Where basically you're passing light through two slits on this wall, and the light passes through the two slits, and then it shows up like on this wall behind the primary wall. I'll actually get a picture and I'll put it up so people can have a good visual. And the thought is that electrons are moving in this wave way, and like this, like in waves. And when they pass through, they're bouncing off each other, and then they create a bunch of lines of light on the back wall. So they wanted to get understanding of exactly how these electrons are moving. I believe, I'm not really 100% sure if I'm explaining it correctly, but
photons, not electrons, but you can do it with electrons too.
So basically they wanted to observe how these photons are moving. And the moment they press, essentially, I'm just going to say like that, like just dumb it down because I can't explain it technically. Basically, when they turned on the camera to record to see these protons moving, the protons suddenly
photons,
photons suddenly recognized that they were being recorded and made two lines. So they sort of stopped moving the way they naturally move for the camera. It's as if they knew that they were being watched, and they corrected themselves. So it's like a way of the simulation disguising itself. It's a clue to how the simulation works, and the simulation doesn't want us to find out. Not sure why, but there's a case to be made for it, Guy.
Okay, so yes, the experiment you're referring to is called the double slit experiment. It's a very famous quantum mechanical experiment that you can actually do yourself. So if you have like a laser, and you can set up a slit or two slits, and you can do this. You just turn all the lights off, and you can get the laser out. It actually works at our macro scale. You can do this sort of quantum experiment at the macro scale, and it's fascinating. And what you're referring to is there ends up being like interference patterns, and then also like you would think that if you have two slits, then you've got double the chances of photons going through the slits. But it kind of like ends up being that less go through the slits when you have two of them because of this interference pattern, which is like this strange thing. And so, I think you're right. A bunch of people take that and sort of extrapolate it to thinking like that the universe is a simulation and that it's trying to stop us from being able to figure it out. There's also another interesting argument, which is like, we seem to figure something out at one level. Okay. And then once we figure it out, it's like it exposes that there's like another level, So one example of this is like, there's stuff, right? You have matter. And then you go, oh, okay, well, that's all there is. There's just this stuff. You got like an orange, you've got an apple, you've got a person, you've got a chair, you've got like this helmet, metal helmet. And then you like find out that like, holy shit, that helmet is made out of like these tinier things called atoms. And then like you go and you discover what an atom is, and then you look and you go, well, what's an atom made out of? And then it's like, well, it's made out of this other stuff. And then like you seem to just be able to keep going in further and further and further. And every time we get to a level, it's like the universe creates another level for us to find out about or to explore. It's like, as we try and figure it out, the simulation makes it, harder and harder for us to figure out, so to speak. Like it's running from us. Or does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I love that, dude. That gives me goosebumps.